Hi, I'm Marc, and on this channel I talk about Brexit and UK politics. The British opposition Labour Party wants to restore the country's economic stability after the chaos under the ruling Conservatives if it wins the election. Labour is ready to serve, ready to lead, and ready to rebuild Britain. That's what Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves said at the Labour conference in Liverpool on Monday. She announced that she would create new jobs, reduce bills for consumers, and strengthen public services. At the next general election, which will probably take place in 2024, people would have the choice. 5 years more of the Tory chaos and insecurity that leaves workers worse off, or a transformed Labour Party that delivers stability, investment, and economic security so workers are better off, Reeves said. The Tories can never be trusted with our economy again. Reeves announced, among other things, that tax loopholes for wealthy foreigners, from which the wife of Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak benefited for a long time, would be eliminated, as would tax breaks for private schools. A covert corruption officer is supposed to recover taxpayer money that was wasted during the pandemic, for example, by awarding contracts for the procurement of protective equipment to acquaintances of government members without a transparent process. Reeves would be the first woman to head the Treasury Department in the country's history, by the way. She previously worked as an economist for the central bank, so the Bank of England. Now former Bank of England boss Marc praised that it was finally time to implement Reeves' ideas. Incidentally, if the Labour Party wins the next UK general election, it would reinstate Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's 2035 ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars, which was extended until 2030 in order to restore safety to the automotive industry. This was stated by Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Jonathan Reynolds, and he did that not on the conference but in an interview with the Financial Times. Reynolds added that the party would impose new binding targets on regional councils and authorities for the establishment of electric vehicle charging stations. He will set out the new automotive sector plan in a speech at the Labour Party's annual conference in Liverpool, or he did that on Tuesday. The Labour Party, meanwhile, was accused of hypocrisy in its policy on private schools. I mentioned that earlier, that point. The party's proposal to raise sales tax on private schools would not affect wealthy parents or schools, but rather those who are less wealthy and rely on those schools to ensure a quality education for their children. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson and her high-income partner, as they were called, can afford to live in affluent areas of London, but they would be looking for ways to deny others the same opportunity for their children, is the criticism. And they say party leader Sir Keir Starmer claims that VAT on private school fees is not an attack on private schools, but the reality is that many of these schools run on slim margins. The additional costs of VAT could place a financial burden on these schools and potentially lead to their closure. Either the Labour Party attacks private schools or accepts that many of them will close, they say. It's not the first time that they criticize the Labour Party for attacking educational institutions, as they put it. According to critics, the party previously destroyed the graphic school system and now wanted to abolish private schools. In September 2019, the Labour Party proposed integrating independent schools into the public sector and confiscating their assets, as the critics put it. Its aim was to promote social justice, but it would have been clear that Labour's agenda was aimed at dismantling private education. Yet Labour's alleged attack on private schools may not be in its best interest. These schools often produce more left-wing thinkers than the public sector. Private education would play a critical role in promoting diversity of thought and should not be devalued. But Labour leader Keir Starmer has also committed to rewriting the UK's Brexit deal with the European Union, when it comes up for review in 2025 if his party is elected to government. He has said he wants a closer trading relationship and better terms than former Prime Minister Boris Johnson negotiated, and has argued this is a necessary step for future national growth. Labour is certainly not proposing to rejoin the EU, but this nevertheless seems a risky topic for the leader of a party that has so often been on the back foot of Brexit. But is it? Much has changed since the fraught years that followed the 2016 vote to leave the EU, and even since the 2019 election, which was fought and won on a Brexit campaign. Unlike the years between 2016 and 2019, the Labour leader's position is now more aligned with that of the public. A majority of people now believe it was wrong to leave the EU, with just a third saying it was the right decision, although, as I said recently, the most would still vote the same. Even among those who voted to leave, just over a quarter now think it was the wrong decision or are no longer sure. A combination of new voters entering the electorate since 2016 and some leave voters changing their mind has meant that the public voice on the issue is markedly different than it was then and in 2019. However, this is not the only factor Starmer will have to consider as he shapes his position on the UK's future relationship with the EU. Another development in recent years is that Brexit is no longer seen as an important issue, and it is not even close to being one. As of October 2nd, just 16% of people rated leaving the EU as one of the most important issues facing the country. That is far below the economy, crime, immigration, health, and the environment. Belief in its importance is even lower among those who voted leave, with 9%, the people most likely to see renegotiating the current terms with Europe as a risk. And this has two implications, one good and one bad for Starmer. The first is that, simply put, people may just not care if he rewrites the Brexit deal. They have more urgent matters on their minds. Nevertheless, that the EU doesn't want to rewrite it, but okay. But they might equally feel that in reopening the discussions, the Labour leader would be focusing on issues that they have had enough of when the country faces substantial social and economic challenges. So there are opportunities and risks for Starmer. Much like when the EU issue became almost synonymous with immigration, how much the Brexit issue cuts through the public and the effect it has may depend on which issues it becomes associated with, if any. There is a suggestion from Starmer that he is attempting to link the negotiations with the economy and the cost of living generally, by far the most important issue, by the way, as well as a vision for a more hopeful future. This may prove successful since a third of the public and nearly half of Labour voters already think Brexit has had a role to play in the cost of living crisis, and they are right with that. Overall, the issue is not likely to be a live one, drowned out by much more urgent problems, and Starmer may see this as a positive, meaning he can negotiate outside of the public eye. Or he may attempt to tie the negotiations even loosely to a broader program to heal the country's economy and society. But much could also still change. As of June, 44% of people had no idea what Starmer's position on the EU was. I still don't. And just 19% think Labour is the best party to handle Brexit. Where there's ambiguity, there's possibility for change. Which direction that is likely depends on which issues the negotiation becomes associated with and how Labour is perceived on these issues. As I recently said about the new study from two think tanks, that most people would still vote the same like they did last time. In that study, or in talking about this, we must not forget there are a lot of new voters. Last time they didn't show up that much at the referendum, but their opinion will be decisive if there ever is another referendum in the distant future. But nevertheless, As I said, I don't still know what Starmer's real position is, or let's say what Starmer's realistic position is on Brexit, because there will not be a full renegotiation of the TCA, because the EU just doesn't want to that. They negotiated for years and they are fed up with it. So we will see what happens, but I'm still looking for some more clear words of Starmer on how he wants to achieve what he's saying. But if you want to see something else about Brexit or UK politics, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.